water.
All right, chapter 7. Where do we move to? Reimbursement. I found a quote for you that I think best summarizes this. Who knows who David Jones is?
I know the name.
The monkey.
Davy Jones.
Maybe. He the one that,
David Jones.
was over something big.
He created something. He started a company that influences every one of you in here.
Oh. I know it, I just can't bring it to the front of my mind.
Where do you get paid?
Third-party bidder.
Name your big third-party payers.
Humana.
He's the founder of Humana.
That's right.
All right, so Mr. Jones in an interview in 1991 says, and this was on primetime TV, hospital charges are inaccurate measurements of the cost of health care to patients, since the vast majority of patients and insurers no longer pay them in full.
Amen. It's true.
I got an amen.
Yes. You got an amen.
We agree with that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
100%.
No, 80%.
80%.
Yeah, but for you.
All right, when it comes to reimbursement, before we look at where we find ourselves today and where we might be going tomorrow, let's again take that little trip through time like we did before. How do we operate through the 1930s through the mid-60s?
They were all private.
Direct pay.
How would you set up how would your facilities have set up what they charged?
Just pick what you want.
Flat rate. 3 chickens.
2 chickens.
Chickens.
Providers would set up charges consistent with others in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Your patients did not really, they lacked the ability to go elsewhere. They lacked the resources, they lacked the network to go someplace else. Your community hospitals, your community doctor offices, my Doc Smith back home, they had to look at what the competition was doing. Again, they needed to stay in business, so they based their costs upon what the local competition was doing. All right, now, new providers. What happened when they came in?
And force them to become competitive with the rates.
Well, they had to become competitive to the rates, but most often their rates were a little higher.
And services.
They were not established they weren't established in the community, and therefore they did not have that volume of existing services to come in as a way of controlling costs. As more and more of that happened, and as people's ability to go out and, let's just say, reach new areas, we start to see it be driven even further. So if you look at it in your community before, I would say within the area of Indiana, okay, we down here in the southern part, across from Louisville, we're in let's just call it the rural section compared to hour and a half up north. Okay, we're rural compared to Indianapolis. Now, down here, it's probably safe to say that in the 1930s, we paid less for medical care. You know, the communities, the citizens here paid less than what they would have in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. Again, based off of a larger and a stronger economy. Now, if I look at, let's say the 1980s through today, do they still have that type of pricing model?
They base it off of Medicare's allowable, and they usually charge like 110% or 120% of what Medicare's allowable is.
It's what they're going to charge, but do you think that people in Louisville, Kentucky have an advantage over people in Indianapolis, or we down here in southern Indiana? No, because we can go to Indianapolis. I could go to Louisville. We've seen an expansion of the number of providers here locally. How many hospitals can I go to? How many doctors can I go to for care? We've seen more of a competition-based driver versus the community. So we've seen more folks entering the industry, more folks entering the market, competition being the driver of how prices are set. All right, 2 factors to lower cost. Managed care. And let's look over here. You can read how healthcare has come under. Can you believe that healthcare pricing has come under public scrutiny?
Really?
Surely not. Could you imagine? ACA requires nonprofit hospitals to limit charges to patients eligible for assistance no more than the lowest amount billed to insured patients. All right, so as we said, Medicare. Prior to 1983, Medicare patients did not even receive a copy of their bill. Since 1983, Medicare patients receive a bill because of reform. They receive a bill from their providers even when they have no financial liability. All right. Flip over to page 175. All right, so how are we going to set these charges? All right, your healthcare entity is charged with charging for items that third-party payers. You first set that charge. We just identified who pays you. Do you think you have to convince them that that cost is legitimate? Not only is the procedure legitimate or a requirement, but that the cost. Okay, so in addition to setting the cost, the first thing you have to do is to set that charge at a rate that is recognized by that third party as a legitimate and acceptable charge. That's going to be the first limitation that's placed on you. Now, within that limitation, what can we do? How can we set charges?
That's where you negotiate your contracts.
How you negotiate your contracts? Look over on page 175.
No, RVU,
What's an RVU method?
relative value.
It even lists the radiology department as an example. All right, so the RVU, relative value units. Next, we have the hourly rate method. Okay, this is if you're going to set the charges based upon the hours used to perform the service. Surcharge methods. Who's going to use the surcharge? Why would they apply a surcharge? Cover overhead. Cover the overhead.
Is that the same as a copay? I'm just curious.
No.
No? Okay.
Copay is your form of sharing the expense with that third party or the cost with that third party. So think of it as your insurance company. It's little cost sharing that you're doing with them. All right, here's a case study. Imagine now you are the CFO of a rural hospital. The chairman of your governing body is discussing with you possible ways to improve the hospital's financial position. During the discussion, he asked you why you cannot increase charges to Blue Cross to cover the losses to Medicare and Medicaid in charity cases. He goes on to say that he used that strategy throughout the 1970s and the 80s. And he doesn't understand why it didn't work after 2010. What would you tell him?
what he's doing, or what it's now illegal. You can do that.
It's illegal. What put that in, what created the standard in which makes that practice no longer
ACA.
ACA? Now you moved up to the CEO. Here's another case study. An influential patient in your office with a hospital bill walks in, he received that hospital day. So an influential patient comes into your office with a bill that he received on a visit the other day. Most of the time that he was at the hospital, he was in the ER. The bill, excluding physician charges, was $17,000, and the patient tells you it's outrageous. He wants to know if you really expect him to pay $17,000. What do you tell him?
You better say yes.
What if he asks you, what did that care cost the hospital?
We'd really tell them they're responsible for the Medicaid allowable charges if they're not eligible for any type of enrollment and then expansion coverage.
So would you tell him that you had to pay for him?
Is he asking to write it off? You can't write it off.
Yeah, we're
Give you
not gonna write it
discount,
off.
You
pay
can't
cash.
write it off.
Pay it all, give you a discount, pay cash.
And need a typical.
All right, somebody tell me what predatory pricing is.
More or less where if I had let's just say, a new clinic that came in, and if I was offering one of my services for very, 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 very cheap, much lower than like the market value or market value for other services being offered by other providers just to get people in the door,
Why would I even bring up predatory pricing?
because I think for certain things, I don't think that's allowed. Like I can't, like, that's why you see hospitals saying $9.99 chest x-rays.
It's people in the door.
Well, now think about what we've said now. We're looking at how we set for charges. What did I say the first thing you had to do? You had to convince that third party that it is legit. Then there's a limitation placed on you on what you can charge. We've recognized that you're not going to receive everything that you charge.
So you're gonna try to get.
Now I'm going to set
payment
right
from
now the
the
tone for
uninsured.
some future expected behavior. If you know you're not going to be charged, you can't charge what you feel like you are owed, and you know you're not going to receive everything that you're charged, what do? You got to find a way to bring in new business. You got to find a way to increase activity. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple methods. You've got to bring in more business. You've got to bring in more to that revenue center. Predatory pricing, method of setting charges low in the short term. It is not illegal. It's the setting prices low in the short term, even if it would mean dipping into the red for a short while, just as a way of increasing activity. Slash pricing. Method of setting charges low in the long term by changing products or services.
So that would be like pharmacies using different vendors or different warehouses to get cheaper generic alternatives.
Or it's like a pharmaceutical company who loses patent protection on their key product. They simply have to go in and can make the most minute change to that formula, even if it doesn't even alter the outcome. But they can go in and set that, and all of a sudden they have patent protection. Follower pricing.
Taking the market average or your competitor's pricing and trying to copy it more or less?
Think of it as follow the leader. It's not just looking at the competition, but it's who is the market leader in your area and setting your pricing method up under theirs. Phase out pricing. Method of setting charges high to eliminate poor quality.
Doctors are doing the MVP thing.
Can you give me an example of that, please?
Setting prices high to eliminate poor quality.
I can come up with
You set your prices high to a level to where you are attracting a higher. I'm speaking as a capitalistic person here, but I'm going to say you're bringing in a higher, so if I don't use medical terminology right now, just correct me,
yeah.
but you are attracting a higher, more affluent customer.
It's those doctors are doing like the MVP programs where I pay them their practice.
A set amount of money for them to valet their medicine, okay.
So you're just saying you're only going to deal with people, if you wanted to eliminate the people who were not going to come in and pay you, but you still have to set those. You would set the prices so high that nobody wants to come to you. It's one of those things where you can't just, you might not be in a situation where you can deny someone, but you'll just set the prices so high that no one would use you. Now, here's where we start getting into some possible regulatory concerns, I would say, in the form of governmental practices. Preemptive pricing. Practice of setting prices low to discourage new entrants to the market. And I say that almost sounds like anti-competition laws that would come into effect here, but at this point, you're going to set prices so low that you simply are going to discourage. You probably would have to have a reasonable market share, but you're going to set prices so low that no one can come in and compete with you. Skim pricing.
Take it.
Practice of setting charges high to reflect quality or market conditions. I'm the best heart surgeon here in Louisville. I'm going to set my price very high. You're going to pay to come and see me. I'm going to demand a higher price. I'm good. Market conditions.
I'm the only one here, so you have to be anyways.
The Zika virus. Some medical concern that drove up the need. You're going to raise the price based off of a changing market condition. Segment pricing. All right, segment pricing is going to fall right behind skim pricing, but I want you to think of the snob appeal here. Practice of setting charges so high, you create that snob appeal. It's cool that I go and see this place.
Jewish Hospital used to have the Traeger Pavilion. It was a floor that had basically a chef prepared your food. It was elegant.
Oh yeah, everything was a suite.
Elegant, and it was for those who wanted to pay for all those extras, and they paid cash for it. And it was a lot of the high officials and Jewish people, and because you had the kosher, everything. It was just beautiful up there. Didn't last very long though.
What shut it down?
Just people, the market fell out of the insurance companies, and when that people just weren't paying for it, and they didn't. I don't.
What time period did they have that?
Oh.
I've seen that Traeger Pavilion, but I mean, I've never been in the.
It's not even there. I mean, they have just people working in those rooms now. That was probably 10 years ago. And
So just think about 10 years.
It
probably fell apart during
Yeah.
the 08 crisis.
Yeah.
Economic downturn.
Yeah, that's
Slide down pricing. All right, I'm going to call this discrimination practice of setting charges at different levels for different customers. I think I even saw some discussion on that in the discussion here. You think of an example of slide down pricing? Or do you all witness slide down pricing?
It's across the board, they're inmate.
All right, loss of leader pricing. Practice of setting charges so low that you're just trying to attract new patients. So again, you're just setting a price so low that your only goal is to set and attract new patients. All right, is there a relationship between cost and price for any given product or service in healthcare? And should there be?
You have the main, yes, because you have, like, just think if you had like an MRI machine, that you have the cost of not only owning it, but you have the cost of maintaining it and running it. So there is cost to it, so the cost and pricing of that.
Definitely say that there would have to be. I don't think there's as much of it as you probably realize. I think there needs to be an increased activity, but before that would happen, Medicare and Medicaid are going to have to start paying closer attention to what, I'm just going to say the waste of what they have in there, more efficient operations. Your providers or your employers are going to have to pay closer attention to cost that they're receiving back from Medicare and Medicaid. And you'd have to find a way that you could reduce charity. I'm going to love this question. Many individuals will concede that healthcare prices are currently irrational. How did we get this way?
Greed.
Great.
From all parties.
All standpoints. They saw this is a market. You can make money, you can make profit, and they wanted to capitalize on it.
I would think we were in a different demographic. We've seen a different, well, let's just say within your facilities, there's been a big shift in your industries from going more setting charges based upon a service. We spent this first part of this chapter over cost accounting. Your hospitals and your healthcare providers have gotten away from cost accounting and looking at what are the true costs associated with what they're doing, and they've relied more on the service of what can we get paid for providing that service. In your all's words, you just said agreed. There's been a shift though. Remember I said in week 1, you're all reviewed now no differently than a Fortune 500 for-profit company. You may have that nonprofit status, but to your stakeholders, for you for-profits, to your shareholders, you're being run as a very complex capital organization. And that shift has come from not looking from the cost side, but more from what the revenue, more from the revenue generating. Now the public and those that represent the public have concluded that the healthcare prices are outrageous. What can the healthcare industry do to restore public confidence?
What can who do? You mean the government or the
No,
hospital?
what can your employers do? What can your industry do?
Well, they've made it, I can go on Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas and I can pull up the providers in any area and say what type of service I want. I can even break it down to the ICD-10 code and it'll pull up the providers in my area and it'll give me a cost analysis and tell me if I go here, it'll be this much.
I'm asking, how can you restore public confidence?
Show me the price.
Show them what?
Show them the price.
Show them the price. I definitely think if you can find a way to be more transparent in how you set your pricing, you're going to restore. You know, I don't think any customer, and I could say this about any business, you know, I don't think any of my own customers come in and think that I work for free. I don't think anybody comes in your hospitals and work for free or think that you all work for free. But at the same time, if you can demonstrate, again, what you are providing and the cost associated with you providing it, think of right now your cost of being in this classroom, your education cost. And there's a lot of people with a lot more education in your facilities that are in those revenue generating centers. You know, again, looking at the cost associated with how you set that. All right, anything from chapter 7?